Welcome to Business Tips with Michael Tobian. Today we're going to be talking about how to register your business. Alright, in the past few videos we talked about planning your business, kind of prioritizing the process the mental process you need to go through to pick what you're going to do, choosing your business name. At some point though, you're going to need to actually register the business, get it all set up with your local government, and get everything put in place so that you're doing things right. I'm going to go over a few things that you need to consider. I'm not going to be talking about things that you ought to do, like you ought to get an accounting software and you ought to get a CRM. I'm not going to be talking about those types of things. What I'm going to be talking about is some necessary steps that you'll have to take. I do want you to keep in mind though that I'm not an attorney or an accountant, so I'm not giving any legal counsel or accounting advice about this. My suggestion is that you get together with an attorney and an accountant and make sure you're doing this right. Because that's not my level of expertise, but also you all are living in different states and maybe even different countries, and the regulations and rules are completely different. So I'm going to be pointing out a few things that you need to consider to be helpful, but this is not a comprehensive list of what you need to do. I don't know what kind of business you're going to be running, so you need to research everything that you need to be in compliance with. But here are some things you want to consider for sure. The first thing is you want to consider what your entity is going to be. You're able to run a business in different ways. You can run it usually just yourself, and that's called a sole proprietorship, where you are the business. The government considers your social security number as being you, and you are operating a business under that social security number. Well, again, talk to an accountant, talk to an attorney about this, but there can be some advantages to having a different entity for your business rather than just running it yourself. There are some legal benefits. There are ways that you can have legal liability separation to an extent by having a separate entity that's the business. There's also tax advantages. Oftentimes you can do things to limit your tax liability by giving yourself a salary in your business and things like that. So talk to an accountant and an attorney and figure out what the best entity setup is for you. You know, if you're not making a lot of money, maybe a sole proprietorship is the right way to run your business. Most people, though, are setting up an entity. There are different kinds of business entities. LLCs, corporations, which there's S corporations and C corporations that are different types of corporation entities. There's limited partnerships. Talk to your accountant and your CPA and figure out which is the right one for you. You can register these business entities yourself, or you can have a registered agent do it. A lot of times people have an attorney do it, and that attorney acts as their registered agent. Again, each state is different in terms of the process that you need to go through. But usually, a state will have what's called a one-stop on their state website. So this one-stop will take you through the process of setting up your business if you choose to do it yourself. It's sometimes kind of hard to find these one-stops because these state websites have so much in it, it's kind of hard to navigate. What I usually do is I go to my state website and I find the chat feature in the Communicate With Us section, and I just get chatting with somebody. I say, hey, I'm setting up a new business, LLC, or whatever I'm doing. Can you take me to the one-stop, or how do I do this? And they'll usually send me a link and say, here you go. And I go in there and I start the process. You know, I've started a lot of businesses and I usually just do it myself. I know a lot of people just want to make sure they do it right, so they have an attorney or somebody do it for them. But that one-stop is usually pretty slick. Some states have lots of more requirements and make it more difficult to start a business. Some states are super easy. I live in Utah. It's quite easy to start a business. I can get it done really quickly. I have a friend in California who says, oh gosh, it's so hard because they make you do this and they make you jump through these hoops and they make you wait a certain amount of time. I can't speak to California. I've not started a business in that state. But make sure you set your expectations with that particular state or locality that you live in so that you'll know what hoops you got to jump through to get this going. All right, During that one-stop process, you're going to run into the second thing you need to consider and get which is an EIN number. So usually at some point you're going through this one-stop, they're asking you questions, and it'll say, what is your EIN number? And you'll say, I don't have an EIN number. First off, what is an EIN number? This is a federal tax ID number that the government uses to identify your business entity. So if you're running it by yourself as a sole proprietorship, the government takes your social security number, and that's what it uses for taxes and things like that, for your business P&Ls, for your business records and tax return. If you set up a business, you'll have a different number, which is your federal tax ID number or your EIN number. You got to set that up. So usually in these one-stops, there'll be a link. You click and it'll be a link to the federal tax ID number system setup thing, and you will get that set up. There's usually a fee or whatever that you got to pay. And at some point, they're going to send you a document that has your EIN number on it. Then you can continue the one-stop and you type in that EIN number, and then you can go on to the next steps in the one-stop. So there's usually a stopping place where you're going to need that EIN number. Okay, so that's the second thing you're going to need. The third thing is you may or may not want to have a DBA that's different from your business. A DBA stands for doing business as. It's simply buying a name that you're able to do business as that name, in addition to whatever name your business is. If you're a sole proprietorship, a lot of sole proprietorships buy a DBA so they can do business as a different name, but even though it's really just them. So if you need that, you can register a DBA with your local state. In a past video, you should check out, we've talked about picking your business name and some considerations. Make sure that business name is available before you register it. Not only with the state, which the state's gonna, before you get a DBA, the state's gonna probably make sure that's available, but you might check with the trademark office. You might wanna make sure that that name is not already in use somewhere else, even though it might not be on your state's website. So anyway, there's your DBA. Sometimes businesses have multiple DBAs. I've got a lot of DBAs. One of my companies is called Utah Live Bands. We've got a bunch of different bands that we own and manage, and I've got a DBA that I've purchased with each one, so I can do business as all these different names. Somebody's hiring one of my bands, they might write a check to that band's name. Well, it's all part of the same company, but I have those DBAs so that they can do that. And so the bank can deposit a check in that name, because usually banks will need proof that you own those names before somebody writes a check to that name. Okay, number 4, you are going to need a business license, probably. This is really location dependent. It's going to depend on the city or the local, the county or whatever requires your business license for where you live. Some cities, if you're a home-based business, don't require a license. Most do. Some of them don't charge you for a license if it's a home-based business that nobody's coming into. It's just you working out of your home. But oftentimes, cities will say, if you are conducting business at all, then you need a business license. And sometimes you got to pay for that. Sometimes they ask you a lot of questions, make you jump through some hoops. Some cities are really lenient on that, and they just ask you minimal questions. I set up a business license the other day for something. The city I live in is super easy. What I was setting up was a home-based little thing. It's not to the point of having employees, and it was, didn't cost me anything. They said for home-based businesses, we don't charge. Well, that was great. If you have a building, or especially if you're in some kind of situation where you have licensing and special guidelines that you need to follow, you're going to have to answer a lot more questions from your city, and they're going to want to make sure you're doing things right. So do get a business license. This is kind of one of those things that oftentimes you're not going to get in big trouble for not having. Sometimes you will, though. Sometimes you get fined if you don't. So sometimes people just don't bother with the business license. I would definitely recommend doing it. You just want to be following things by the book. I've run into problems in the past. It's my personality just to kind of do things, and then sometimes worry about the guidelines later. And I've run into problems with things like that where somebody will say, hey, your license isn't renewed, and then I kind of got in trouble, or I missed out on opportunities. For example, I was going for this grant, and everything was going great for the grant. I was going to be approved by this grant, but
it was like one final step. Oh, we just need you to copy your business license. I went, oh shoot, I don't think I renewed that. And guess what? It was a big problem for this grant. I lucked out because I told them, hey, I guess this didn't get renewed or whatever. I think it had been quite a while since it got renewed. And I went and renewed it, but they said, no, your business license had to have been renewed as of a certain date. And I was like, I'm gonna lose out on this grant because I was too, dim-witted to just renew the dumb license. And anyway, I did end up working it out. I had to renew my license, and then I was able to prove to them in a different way that I had been operating a business in that city. But I was kind of walking on some thin ice there. So you got to make sure that you're doing things right. As your business grows, it becomes more and more important to make sure you're doing everything right. Whether you have sales tax license or all this kind of stuff, you can get into some big trouble if you're not following the guidelines of your local authorities when it comes to running your business. I would just somehow organize a folder or a document or something where you are notating and keeping track of all these things that you have to do on a yearly basis, like renew your business, renew your business license, or anything that you got to do there. Okay. So get a business license, and don't let that be one of those things that just kind of falls by the wayside. Number 5, you may need a sales tax license. You might not. It all depends on where you live. In Utah, currently, most service businesses don't require a sales tax license. I do have one because I have something where I sell stuff, or was, and I'm not doing that as much anymore. But a lot of what I do doesn't require a sales tax license because I am a service-based business. However, there was a big piece of legislation that was happening in my state about a year ago where they were considering taxing all services with sales tax, or having the service businesses collect sales tax. Everyone was up in arms. In fact, I went to the Capitol press conference, and I talked to the press about some of the issues with this particular bit of legislation that I had concerns with. And guess what? A lot of people were really upset about the way they were going about doing this, and it didn't pass, largely because a lot of people will voice their opinions about it. So some states do it though. They tax lots of services. Often states will have certain services they tax. They'll list plumbers need to be taxed, or this industry needs to be taxed, this industry has sales tax, and other service businesses don't. So make sure that you don't need to provide sales tax. If you're providing a service, you might not need to pay sales tax, but if you're renting gear, you might. I produce events for a living, and in my state, if I'm providing a service, I don't, but if we're renting stages or things like that, if you're providing rentals, you may need a sales tax. So those are things to consider. Sales tax is generally something that the consumer owes. So when they buy something from you, they may owe sales tax, but it's usually the job of the business that's selling the service or selling the product or providing the service to collect and pay the sales tax. That's why when you buy something, it's a certain price, but then sales tax is on top of it. You might think, well, that seems like a sneaky way to add additional costs. The reason they do it that way is because you as the consumer actually owe that tax. It's their job to collect it. So that's why sales tax is usually not included in the price. If you see something that says tax included, they're usually just trying to make it a little easier for you, and they're just like, yeah, I'll just cover your sales tax just to make this an even $10 or an even $5 or whatever. Okay? So sales tax license, you may need one. Look into that. All right, number 6, there may be industry specific guidelines that you need to follow for your industry. In fact, there are so many, I can't even mention even close to all of them. So look into your industry. But I will mention just a few things to consider. You may have environmental or OSHA things to consider. They're really big on environmental, making sure you're, with waste and that you're, handling things appropriately so that the environment is protected. You may have Board of Health concerns. I'm putting on a drive-in concert outside, but because of COVID-19, the Board of Health is very concerned with us making sure everything is safe, social distanced. So I've been working with the Board of Health to make sure we're doing that in an appropriate way. There are things that are unique to certain industries. I have a casino party business where it's all totally fake. It's not real gambling. It's just fun holiday parties where people play these gambling games, but they're not exchanging money. Well, I wanted to make sure I was in compliance with gaming laws because in Utah there's no gaming or gambling allowed. So I contacted the Attorney General's office. They gave me guidelines as to what to follow to make sure it's not gaming, and we are very strict about that. We put it in our contract with the clients and say, this is not real gambling. We need to make sure that these guidelines are followed. I make sure the client is aware of it, and we follow it very strictly. And if I ever have a client that says, oh, can we do this, and it kind of seems like there might be some gambling going on, we absolutely say, no, we're not going to be involved with that because we don't want to get in trouble. Okay? Noise ordinances you might deal with. I deal with this a lot with events, in certain neighborhoods where there's noise ordinances. They have decibel levels that we need to stay under. And then finally, licensing. A lot of businesses have licensing requirements. They want you to have a certain amount of education before you go out and you cut people's hair or certainly provide medical services or anything like that. So there's a lot of licensing. Look into your licensing and look into anything else that you think might be an issue. Talk to people in the industry also. People in the industry are going to know exactly what you need to do. Talk to an attorney or something like that, okay? Like I said before, this is not a comprehensive list of things that you need to do. This is just some things to have you think about when you're putting together and registering your business. There may be a lot more requirements. Finally, and I cannot stress this enough, when you are getting your business started, especially if you plan on growing your business and having it be successful, become best friends with a CPA and an attorney. These people are going to help you get out of trouble. They're going to help you limit your tax liability, but they're also going to help you to make sure that you're not doing things wrong or being overly aggressive with your deductions and things like that so you get in trouble with audits, okay? These people have expertise. They're going to help you. And again, I'm certainly not giving any accounting or legal counsel. So you're going to want to talk to an attorney or an accountant and have one that's just always there for your consultation purposes. Thanks for joining us today. If you're interested in getting more tips about running your business, I would encourage you to subscribe below, and we'll talk to you next time.